Good afternoon. We are here for a simple reason. Trump is robbing our states in broad daylight, and we are not going to be quiet about this. We're not going to stop fighting for our states and our communities, and we are going to make every single person understand what is happening and what it means for our states, for our communities, and for this democracy. Last year, we all worked across the aisle to hammer out a bipartisan understanding about what projects needed Army Corps construction funding. And we isn't just the four of us here, it includes our Republican counterparts and even our House colleagues. But President Trump is ripping up the roadmap that we all agreed on, even the House Republicans, and turning the Army Corps construction funds into his personal political slush fund. To give you a sense of how blatantly political this is, consider the fact that the Corps budget request last year, the bipartisan Senate bill my committee passed unanimously, and the House bill, the Republican House bill, all split the funding just about evenly. Every one of them split it between 50-50 between red and blue states. Now compare that to Trump's partisan takeover. This thing is totally lopsided. Roughly 2/3 goes to red states and 1/3 for blue states. That is not how this should work. An out-of-control Republican president punishing blue states and rewarding his friends instead. I don't know how you get more obviously partisan than cutting California, the most populous state in the country, out of the Army Corps construction funding entirely. Trump slashed over $100 million for projects that reduce flooding, for crying out loud. I mean, who is pro-flooding? And I just don't know how you get more blatantly corrupt than zeroing out $500 million for Washington State, completely shifting major work at the Howard Hanson Dam, work to address dam safety, water supply issues, and more. And it's a project that has been years in the making. It's being slashed at the stroke of one careless pen, at the will of one corrupt president alone. So why does President Trump think our constituents don't need safe water supply? Why does President Trump think our constituents don't need to be protected from floods? It's because he doesn't care. But it's actually worse than what I just laid out, because Trump is not just taking hundreds of millions of dollars from blue states, projects that we all agreed on, Republicans and Democrats. He's actually shoveling this money to projects that were not funded by either bill, in either chamber, and that is nakedly political. Suddenly, projects in or near his allies' districts are funded. So we need answers, and more than that, we need accountability. Yesterday, a top Army Corps official testified before the House, and let me tell you, she had absolutely no acceptable or even half-convincing justification for these decisions. In fact, she very explicitly stated that OMB, not the experts at the Corps, called the final shots. That should raise everyone's eyebrows. Russ Vought calling the shot for your constituents. So we're here today to call this out, and we're here to say we're going to fight this tooth and nail to make this right and make these critical projects whole. I will tell you right now, I will not let defunding Howard Hanson Dam stand in any future bipartisan spending bill. And I will continue warning my colleagues about passing another partisan CR which gave this administration that power to pick winners and losers like this in the first place. I warned about exactly this before I voted against the CR. I warned that Trump could and would abuse the discretion in a slush fund CR to rob our communities. And now here we are. So every single member needs to pay close attention to what is happening here and speak out. Because it may not be your state today, but what happens when your governor disagrees with this president? What happens when you vote against him and your state loses out on funding? Take my word, you do not want to find out. We have to put a stop to this, and we are pushing back now and will continue to do so. Let me turn it over to my colleague, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Senator Murray, and thank you for your leadership on this important issue and your articulation prior to that vote why it was so critical. It's great to be here with our California colleagues as well. One thing is for sure, probably two of the strongest economies in the entire United States are California and Washington. But we're strong economies because we're coastal states with many ports. We have a vibrant innovation economy, but we have to take care of our natural resource environment for that economy to continue. That is why we're here, because we need a reality check on that Republican-led resolution that cut the Army Corps budget by 44% and gave, as Senator Murray said, the administration the power to decide which Army Corps project should be funded. Why did we do this? We all voted against it. The administration directed the Army Corps to develop a blatantly political work plan that will hurt fishing families, hamper port competitiveness, and endanger our economy. Look no further than the Army Corps' plan for salmon recovery. The Army Corps cut the Columbia River salmon recovery by 50%. On top of that, the administration's 30% cut to NOAA's fishery management programs is a 1-2 punch for coastal communities and their jobs. I can tell you the fishermen and the fisheries depend on this kind of management to continue to move our fishing economies forward. Puget Sound communities are also taking a major hit. The Army Corps canceled $500 million in fish passage, as my colleague said, on the Howard Hanson Dam. To be crystal clear, the administration canceled a bipartisan, consensus-based project that would have opened over 100 miles of salmon habitat. And why do we have the Howard Hanson Dam to begin with? Because the Kent Valley, a critical industrial part, and probably a major part of the aerospace supply chain exists right there. And if you don't do something to continue to protect and make improvement to the Howard Hanson Dam, you risk that entire economy from the impacts of flooding and what we've been dealing with in climate change. So, this guts our salmon goals, disregards our projects called into question for the future of a maritime economy that relies on salmon, and another result of the Army Corps' unfederated power, another result of the administration's unfettered power over the Army Corps, millions in funds cut from the seaports that employ millions of Americans nationwide and generate billions of dollars in economic activity, including an 84% cut to the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, which receive that money for waterway maintenance and improvements. Canada and Mexico are going to win the day, not just the tariff problem, but the increasing investments that they make in our ports, while this administration, at the time that we're on the Pacific, in the era of the Pacific, is pulling money out of the ports. It's not just our agricultural products that we deliver through these ports. We deliver product for everybody across the United States, for automakers, for soybean growers, for many, many products that want to reach distant shores. In 2024, 1.1 million ocean containers bound to or from the U.S. were shipped through British Columbia instead. Had that cargo been handled in the United States, it would have resulted in $3 billion in additional revenue and nearly $1 billion in labor income and nearly 14,000 jobs in the United States of America. So competitiveness with Mexico and Canada are real issues. So to remain in the game, we must invest in our waterways. We must invest in our port infrastructure. And the Army Corps is the U.S. port's largest outside investor, and the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund is the bank. So that is why Senator Murray and I worked so hard to find a resolution in the Water Resource Development Act that would have helped ports of all sizes continue to be supported in the maintenance of crucial ports that handle most of our nation's cargo traffic. But the Trump administration ignored that law, decided politics was more important than investing in America's competitiveness, and the new Army Corps work plan does not include a fair share of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund for these strategically vital ports. So we are here today to call attention to the fact that over $45.4 million was less received in this budget. This is a huge problem for the next 5 years. We want to stabilize our ports. We want the Army Corps to do their investment on important waterway issues. We want to grow economic opportunity at an age when the Pacific economy is continuing to grow. We want to be on the doorstep of that access and to be efficient about delivering it, not giving those jobs away to Canada and Mexico. Thank you, Senator Murray. And I think, I might have taken the list. Alex is next.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Thank you, Senator Murray, for pulling us together on this important and sadly timely topic. Now, it's worth remembering that when any of us takes our oath of office, us as senators and even Donald Trump as President of the United States, you become a senator for all your constituents. Donald Trump became a president for all Americans, not just for red states or for blue states, but for every state and every community equally. Yet since the minute Donald Trump returned to office, he set out to politicize the office that he holds. He's threatened to condition disaster aid to our constituents who are victims of the January fires and working hard to rebuild their homes and communities. He's installed loyalists at the Department of Justice, and we've seen the horrible consequences of that. And look what's just played out in these last 24 hours. At Trump's direction, Republicans in the Senate have decided to go nuclear on the Senate rules simply to attack the authority that California has enjoyed for more than 50 years to set our own emission standards to clean our air and protect the public health of Californians. Now, that alone is unprecedented. But as we've learned that President Trump is trying to take hundreds of billions of dollars in flood prevention funding away from the states that happen to not to vote for him and redirect them to projects in states that did support his election, it's absolutely wrong. In California, that means cutting every last dollar of funding that was marked for flood control projects, more than $126 million in funding, which would have significant and devastating consequences for our state. Now, 1 in 5 Californians, all right, our state population is nearly 40 million, I think 8 million Californians are exposed to flood risk each and every year. California is actually home to several high-risk areas, but the most at-risk area in the nation for catastrophic flooding is the Sacramento-Natomas Basin, just outside our state capital. Now, for as heartless and brazenly partisan as it sounds, I guess we shouldn't be shocked, because that's just how this president has chosen to serve. The same administration who in January ordered the Army Corps of Engineers to, quote, open the valves and release water from 2 reservoirs in the Central Valley as he was trying to politicize the LA fires. The end result of that was not any sort of relief to the fires in Los Angeles, but 2 billion gallons of water wasted. Water no longer available for growers come the hot, dry summer months. For a president so obsessed with finding waste, fraud, and abuse, I think I know where he can find it. He just has to look in the mirror. He is a fraud. He's wasting taxpayer resources, and he's abusing his office. And as a result, communities up and down the state of California, from farmers and farm workers in the Central Valley to farmers and farm workers in the Pajaro Valley along the coast, all these communities and others are now at higher risk of flooding because Donald Trump's playing politics with federal funding. It's wrong and has to stop. And not only do we say it's wrong, we can demonstrate the right way to do it. See, in the prior 4 years, investment in our infrastructure was done on a bipartisan basis. We helped address the needs of red states and blue states working together. And states were better prepared against potential catastrophic flooding. So today, yes, we're calling on President Trump to do the right thing, stop playing these political games, reinstate the California Army Corps' flood prevention funding, and genuinely work to protect all American lives. And with that, I am proud to introduce my colleague representing California, Senator Schiff.
Alex, thank you, and Senator Murray, thank you for bringing us together, and thank you more broadly for your leadership in making sure that the resources of the country are appropriated in a nonpartisan way that meets the needs of all Americans. It is good to be with you, although I regret the occasion that brings us together. We are witnessing a politically motivated, total zeroing out of crucial federal funding for Army Corps projects in California and other blue states to funnel funding towards projects in red states. It is as simple and as ugly and as blatant a political move as that. This move to eliminate essential funding for projects with the simple intention these projects have of saving lives and preventing floods. This action threatens millions of people from both parties and puts lives at risk. This is deeply personal for all of us and our states. In the case of California, we face natural disasters year-round, and the Army Corps plays a vital response role in assisting states before, during, and after natural disasters. Yet in California, we're seeing over $125 million in cuts to flood prevention projects. With the administration's Army Corps funding plan, 2/3 of the budget will support projects in red states, and only 1/3 will support projects in blue states. In California, it is flood protection projects that are completely zeroed out in this budget as part of the total $1.5 billion in cuts to Army Corps construction funding. The termination of projects like these is especially concerning given that their purpose is to protect communities, and in particular, at-risk frontline communities. The projects that were underway but now have been cut are in place to protect these communities against flood risk. This includes 4 significant flood prevention projects in California. One of the projects that my colleague Senator Padilla referenced to lose funding is Sacramento's Natomas Basin. The Army Corps describes it as, quote, one of the most at-risk areas in the nation for catastrophic flooding. This is what the president would zero out. One of the most at-risk areas in the nation. Another project zeroed out the West Sacramento Levee Project. This is an area that encompasses 2 basins, has a population of 48,000 residents, and surrounds vital infrastructure, including postal service centers, Department of Water Resources flood fight facilities, CHP Academy, the Port of West Sacramento, and others. This location, the Corps has said, has, quote, a high probability of flooding due to its location. And now that project won't get the funding that it needs. The Pajaro River Flood Risk Management Project was previously set to receive the funding it needed to provide 100-year flood risk reduction to the city of Watsonville and the town of Pajaro. That has now been cut. Pajaro, as many of you may know, was the scene of that tragic flood because of a lack of investment. And finally, Pajaro would get investment, and the administration is cutting it. In 2023, a flood devastated hundreds of homes, and this project was intended to remedy how vulnerable this community is to further disaster. The San Joaquin River Basin Project is another critical project addressing significant flood risks in the Central Valley. These flood prevention projects were set to gain the funding they needed, but now it's our most at-risk Americans that will pay the price for these chaotic threats to cancel funding. We're not going to stand by as they plan out this roadmap that includes drastic and harmful cuts. Natural disasters don't discriminate based on whether a state is red or blue, and the administration and Congress shouldn't either when it comes to protecting communities from natural disaster. This puts us on a very dangerous path, a path where anything can be on the chopping block for a partisan reason. Today it's funding for these projects. Tomorrow could be another form of funding meant to save lives. There will be a domino effect of threats aimed at blue states. When you're elected to be president of the United States, you're not a half president. You're not president for only half of the country, not if you do the job right. These baseless attacks threaten millions of people from both parties whose lives are endangered by floods. We need to remind the administration that a state may be blue or red, but it contains millions of people who are both blue and red. It's clear the Trump administration is politicizing the Army Corps and its critical mission to provide resources and stability to communities and states. When the fires broke out in LA earlier this year, we saw threats from the president and the administration to cut funding to California to help these communities rebuild. And during this time, we also saw the president order the release of water from 2 California reservoirs, water that could not and did not reach Los Angeles. The release was done by Doge, quote, to satisfy Trump, unquote. That's what the Army Corps said about the order to waste billions of gallons of water from California reservoirs, all for a photo op. It was dangerous because it could have led to flooding, and now we're seeing funding cuts to flood prevention projects aimed at protecting our communities. When people need help, we help them. When people are fighting to rebuild, we help them rebuild. And when people need protection from flooding, we assure funding is in place so they're protected. No matter who the president is, no matter who's in charge of Congress, no matter who the governor is or who the senators are, no matter what state it is or what color of the state, this cannot and should not change. If this continues and we don't stand up, this administration will continue to single out blue states for less protection for all of their citizens. To those of us who experience disaster in our states, and it's all of us, we must show a sense of urgency. Because when disaster strikes and the floods rise, the only thing that matters is whether or not your government has been there for you when you needed it. People don't have time for partisan political games. We cannot allow another community or another state to be the target of cruel, unwarranted budget cuts and complete neglect at the hands of this administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions.
So considering this and, everything else, do you think it's possible to reach a top-line deal with Senator Collins to stop the Senate appropriations?
I think it's critical that we continue to work with our Republican counterparts to do our job as we are supposed to, which is to be the power of the purse, to work with each other, to find compromise, and to move forward. That takes both blue and red states to get there. We have always done that. It is really disheartening when this president takes what we have done in a bipartisan way and then says, forget what you've all done, I am going to go after blue states or projects that he personally has threatened somebody with or whatever. How do we compromise, come together and vote for something when the fear constantly is, but the president will never go through with this? So it makes it very hard. Having said that, I am committed to work with my Republican counterparts, and they need to tell the president that commitments are commitments, agreements are agreements, bipartisan votes are bipartisan votes, and we expect you to stand with us to enforce that. Yeah.
On that point, I was going to ask something similar, but you said, Senator Murray, that you will ensure that in the next full-year appropriations
Correct.
bill, something like Howard Hanson Dam will be funded. Are you essentially relying on your Republican counterparts and their word to protect that, or is there something you can do in the statute that would?
Well, we will explore every opportunity and every wording to make sure that we have funds protected. But let me remind you why we are here where we are here. The House voted not unanimously, but the House voted for these projects. The Senate, bipartisan, voted for these projects. They were in the bills we were ready to go with. What happened is the Republicans only in the House sent over a CR for the funds remaining with no protections in it, and gave this president carte blanche to do what we are seeing in front of us. Not again.
Senator Murray, could you explain at all a little more the significance of OMB's role in this? Did you not know before the degree to which OMB had a hand in the Army Corps work project?
Well, clearly they did, because the Army Corps project list is not reflected in what OMB partisanly did.
Last question, Senator Cantwell, I wonder if what implications do you see for this in terms of all the federally funded fish passage projects, some of the obviously commitments to tribes in the Northwest and other parts of the country, I imagine, and specifically, I know that you've been involved in the Columbia River Treaty and efforts to finalize that renegotiation. I wonder if there's any, if this or the administration messing with dams in the Northwest generally threatens that.
Well, that's an important point, and I can just tell you, working on the Surface Transportation Act, we did everything to put programs in place that helped all states. Even when we created a mega program Some of our colleagues were like, mega, well, that'll probably be big bridges in big states. And we said, okay, well, we'll have a mega program for states of this size, because they're of significance to your region. So to all of a sudden throw out this good policy-based work for politics is a problem. And it's a problem because we do have a changing climate, and we do have, you talk to any scientist, they'll say it's going to be warmer and wetter. That's it. We're going to have less snowpack, and we're going to have a lot more water. And we're already seeing the effects of that. And so the question becomes, how are we going to best prepare for flooding? And so if you take flooding out of the science out of flooding, and you make it about politics, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to cost the U.S. government more money. In fact, I think we had a CBO report that came out, we'll get you, that says how much climate is going to cost the federal government. So you realize you have to start doing the smartest things you can do to mitigate those costs to the U.S. taxpayer. So I would say playing politics with that is the opposite of what you want to do. You want to base this on science. And given that the Columbia River Treaty is part of a flood risk management strategy, we were counting on the Army Corps of Engineers to put forward some investment to upgrade that system. But if they're going to play politics, then you're not even going to get that kind of support. So now is not the time, with an ever-changing environment where flood risk management destroys economics and takes longer for recovery, to say nothing of the loss of lives. Now is not the time to play politics. Now is the time to base it on science and input from the responsible agencies. This isn't about, there's no savings here, I can tell you that. They're not saving money. So they're basically going to cost a lot more to the taxpayer.
I'll offer just,
Yeah,
if I
go
can,
ahead.
two quick examples of not just California significance, but frankly national significance. One is the internal water infrastructure within California. Most of our precipitation falls in the north. The population bases are mainly in the south. And so we have a network of intertwined federal and state water infrastructure, including dams and reservoirs, but also canals and other types of conveyance to move the water when we need it to certain areas of the state for municipal use, for agriculture, for environmental maintenance and stability. That gets compromised when the administration acts as recklessly as they demonstrated earlier this year. California is the fourth largest economy in the world, largest contributor to the Treasury. So that in and of itself is important. The other even bigger example that we can point to is the Colorado River. 7 states rely on Colorado River water, and part of maintaining that slowly dwindling supply is the series of dams and reservoirs along the Colorado River. So when you start playing politics, you threaten not just the environment, not just the health of the populations throughout, 40 million people along the Colorado River basins alone, but the economy by extension. So high stakes here, high stakes. Let's trust the scientists, let's trust the experts, let's trust the data, let's not play politics.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. No, thank you.
Thank you.